your internet.
Hello and welcome to the Sky Beer Games podcast. Episode 16. Hey, it's my favourite number.
It is.
Yay!
And we've got some special guests on with us today.
Yay!
We've got Alex and Eric from Bundle Buddies. Hey guys.
Oh, hi.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you so much for having us. We're so excited to be here.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you for inviting Alex and letting me tag along like a little baby.
Yeah, actually, thank you very much for that. That's really nice of you.
I didn't. My parents were out this weekend, so I needed something to do.
All right. Why don't you guys tell the audience about Bundle Buddies, which is something awesome, but I'll let it come from you guys.
Yeah, Eric and I have been friends for many, many years. We met in Chicago doing improv comedy together, and we're just buddies. And then he moved out here way before I did, and I stayed in Chicago for a little bit longer. And then when I came out here, we sort of rekindled our friendship and would drink a lot of beers in his backyard and hang out. And right during the start of quarantine, I think me and him reacted kind of similarly in that it was sort of like, okay, this means I can get my video game on in a much bigger way. Yeah. And it gradually assumed a much bigger part of our lives. And then the itch.io bundle for racial justice and equality came out in June after the really extremely tragic murder of George Floyd, and I don't know how things were in New Zealand, but in the United States, basically everything stopped. And that was all that anyone's life was about for a few weeks. It just felt like such a truly insane time where there were a lot of really radical notions of racial justice that were finally being discussed in the mainstream. It was a really amazing moment. And part of that was this website called itch.io, which I'm sure your listeners know about since you guys publish your games there, put out a call to create a bundle for racial justice and racial and social justice. And it was like over 2,000 items. It raised like over $8 million. And there, I enthusiastically, and including your guys' games, which, super kudos for putting it in there, but I enthusiastically bought it, but then was kind of like, had this moment of like, okay, shit, like I've heard of a couple of these games, but like, what do I do? Like, what should I play? What's like, what's worth it? What's not worth it? What's like weird? What's like straight ahead? Like what's anything?
And what was funny was Alex had gotten this bundle, and a couple of our friends got this bundle, and he was trying to like figure out some way to try to he maybe started streaming some of them, started a Discord, was just trying to figure out hey, can we play some of these games and find out what's good? And everybody was like, that sounds awesome, but nobody really took to it. Nobody was like, oh yeah, I'm happy to dive in there. And then I think for a while I had been, wanting to do a podcast, like every other person in Los Angeles. I have a great idea for a podcast. And so I floated that idea up to him, and he was like, oh, what if we, play through this bundle? And I'm a big fan of, huge Sisyphusian undertakings. So I agreed. So we've played like 60 games of the 1,300 plus games.
Yeah, exactly. Wow. It's been really fun so far. I don't know. It's interesting too. I think pretty early on it emerged that Eric and I are pretty good foils for each other in terms of like what we like from games, what we want out of them, and also the way in which we're approaching the project and sort of like our attitudes and vibes are a little different, which also creates some like fun creative tension where we get to like be a little mean to each other about stuff, which is I think so important. And all creative
well, it's nice because I think
if there's something that we like, we always agree.
There's no conflict here.
I mean, you guys have the added layer of I'm not. Can we talk? Can we? Do people know you're married? Like on the podcast?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I mean,
we're gross I can't say married things.
Yeah.
I gotta imagine that creates a whole nother level of wonderful creative tension and sort of the things. Because Eric's a good friend of mine, but if he pisses me off, I don't have to fucking see him. For
oh wait, sorry. Is swearing okay? Or swearing?
We don't usually, but I'll allow it.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That's on me.
Wow.
It's okay. No, it's
Yeah.
okay. It's not like children actually listen to us.
Yeah, if it happens, it happens.
Yeah.
You know, don't sweat it.
That will be the last swear. That's the first and only swear on the Skyward Games podcast. I promise.
Honestly,
I don't
it's
know.
not a big deal.
In college, I was doing like a folk punk kind of solo act for a little while, and had a friend who was doing who had like a radio show, and she had me on, and she was like, "Don't swear," and so like, I was like, "Okay," and then I played through the song, and I like edited, like the song to like cut the swearing out, and then at the very end, like the last chord, I misstrummed, and I swore.
Oh.
I was like, oh. Had the like, and then a policy was passed that no extraneous guests were allowed on the radio ever again. So I'm bad.
I feel like, and then the Curb Your Enthusiasm credits music starts.
Right, exactly.
That moment. Oh, wow. That's yeah. Well, we were covering the bundle on our podcast sort of around the same time. Oh, wait, did we start in, this has been June or?
I don't
I was
even
saying
remember
July,
now.
but maybe it was June.
It's a while
I
ago
don't know
now.
anymore. Because we were definitely talking about it because, like, we were also covering, because at the same time, Wizards were saying, we're going to take out all this race essentialism to do with, like, orcs are all dumb and
orcs are
brutish
this, all,
and savage.
And some of that sort of worked, and some didn't, and we sort of said,
we did our takes on it,
that's nice, but give us some actual...
Because at the same time, some people of colour who'd worked for Wizards were like, hey, it's nice that you're saying this and all, but, like, you didn't pay us, you treated us like crap, like, come on.
Yeah, there have been a lot of those sort of performative kind of gestures that are very, public. I mean, like, if you look at some of those cards, some of those cards are rough, right? Like some of those early Magic the Gathering cards are like,
they banned a couple of them that like no one would ever play or think about or know, and like they're awful, but then again they are doing good stuff for increasing representation now, and they've just put out a series of stories about a non-binary planeswalker that have been really enjoyable, and they've been a really good character, Nico Aris in Keltime, so I've been liking that.
Not to completely derail the conversation, but did you guys ever read any of the novelizations of Magic the Gathering? There's specifically only one I'm thinking about there. They made a Urza's Brothers War book that was really good. And then the sequel where Urza's like sort of plane hopping is honestly the worst piece of fantasy I've ever read in my entire life. And
so I'm going to have to look that up once I finish my Dragonlance read, just saying.
Right. But I've yet to find someone else who's read it. It was like so laborious to get through it. I forced myself to.
I haven't read it. I've read a couple of the Magic novels, but only a couple. I know I've always wanted to track down the Brothers War one, the first one, because I'm familiar with the author of that from Dragonlance, and he wrote a lot of the better stuff.
Oh, really?
So,
I didn't even know that.
Oh, yeah. Jeff Grubb.
I'm going to have to check him out some more and see.
He currently does theatre reviews and politics.
Huh, okay.
And he wrote some of the comedy stuff.
Wow, we really went off the rails.
We just went off on a tangent. But hey,
I'm okay with that.
I'm sorry. That's kind of our...
No. That is actually what we end up doing every time we have friends on the podcast.
Oh, we just go off on whatever tangent we want.
Yeah, we say this is our topic, but then we go way off.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think Wizards. It's hard to tell, right? It's hard to tell what is what's performative, what is the company actually doing, and then I think also like with Magic stuff and a lot of gaming stuff, it's like it's hard to differentiate where the company kind of ends and the player base kind of begins, right? In terms of culture of, whether or not it's representation or, I mean, like, you were just on Bundle Buddies, and I think we lost a lot of good audio. But Claire, you were saying like you don't even go into shops to play, right? And so it's like I wonder where what responsibility a company like Wizards can and should take on, right? And a lot of these game companies that will have like you said, non-binary representation and stuff like that, and then like the players are still just toxic dudes, right? It's like what.
And not just the players. So, like, Wizards has done their best in the last few years. Like, if you've noticed, Liliana has stopped being so... Her dresses are no longer as low-cut as they used to be.
Sure.
She's more, like, powerfully sexy rather than just, like, pin-up sexy.
Uh-huh.
So, like, that's a nice move. But on the other hand, when I go into... I'm thinking of, like, one store in particular in Auckland that James used to work for, whose name shall not be spoken. But... They're, like, the posters are all just, like, really booby anime girls, and...
I know when I was there, anytime women came in, they looked uncomfortable.
Yeah.
They'd look at the shop, they'd look at what was in the shop, and they'd just immediately... You could tell it was like, oh, this place isn't for me.
Yeah, that's just the thing. It just feels unwelcoming.
I couldn't get the management to do anything about that.
Yeah. They wouldn't listen to your words on that.
I think that's the worst part of it, too. Is just like, I had that feeling a lot when I worked for a theater company as a creative director.
Oh, yeah?
But there was,
Really?
it was improv, though. It was in Chicago, so it's a whole... It was a whole life ago, but the boss of that theater, like, we had a bit of a racial reckoning there, and also, like a sexist reckoning, and there was stuff that like I wanted to do to try to make things better, to try to change things or do things, and the boss paid lip service to it. Then ultimately they don't do it. And what I've figured out is, or what I've decided was, if they don't want to change their company, like honestly and earnestly, then there's you can't stick around. You just have to put your energy elsewhere.
Yeah.
And I think that's so much of the moment right now is what we're going through is it's going to be a big question of like what survives and what doesn't, as we sort of negotiate these things. So hopefully in 20 years, people, there's less shops that are like that, or it's like, at least in this having this conversation means that like in 5 years, there will be a non low cut anime boob shop that women will feel more accepted in, and then that'll just be the one that you know what I mean? So there will be more room for people.
Yeah. Well, we do have a shop that we do like to go to, and they are very about making everyone comfortable, not just women, but they have these specific anti-bullying policies, anti-harassment policies, and they're really good. And none of their advertising on the walls is crass in any way. So
we really
just
like
a lot of anime guys with just like rippling pecs.
Just the jacked anime guys. Which, I just worried we're setting up another standard that we're playing into, guys. But at the same time, those guys look so good.
Yeah. I mean, there's a whole other conversation there about, like, I love anime, I love manga, I love JRPGs, but there is a lot of problematic stuff there sometimes. Like, one of my huge loves, Persona... Even in Persona 5, like, one of the main characters, like, one of the sort of initial trio of characters that you run around with gets, like, sexually objectified.
Hypersexualized.
Again and again and again.
Yeah. It is.
It's just a teenage girl.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
When I initially saw that, I was like, oh, God. And they sort of, like, redeem themselves in a moment by, like, you kick the shit out of, spoiler, but like, you like kick down one of the people who's doing the sexual harassment, and you're like, yeah, that's great. But then there's sort of that even more insidious, pervasive, like played for like sort of winks and laughs and like, nods for the rest of the game, which is a bummer. But that pervy Japanese thing, which is itself probably a problematic statement.
There's just layers now.
Right.
So,
they came under fire for their depiction of. They had like some homophobic parts happening with some characters as well. So that got more attention than the treatment of the character Arn. But anyway. Maybe Persona will come up again later because we're talking like games that we like to play. Mm-hmm. So we sort of had a rough topic.
Yeah,
we
the
have
topic for
already
today
sort of
is nostalgia.
Yeah.
So I think for all gamers, really, we got into this in our childhoods, and I think there's a certain amount of trying to sort of recapture your childhood in gaming.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I thought that we could start talking about some of the... I don't think we should go right back to, like, you know, your Amstrad and my Amiga Commodore, because, like, you know, even though I like those things, but I don't like, feel
the foundational games.
I don't feel the ones that need to go back
into it. What are the ones that we're still trying to sort of...
I was thinking about, like, bringing up things like Final Fantasy, which I know you guys have played some Final Fantasies, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, big fan. I like Final Fantasy VII, and we've talked about it a bit on Bundle Buddies, but it was...
I feel like we bring it up every week.
Oh, yeah. I mean, because it was such a, like...
Not quite, but...
I don't know if you all remember the experience of Final Fantasy VII.
Not yet, but one day soon.
But
I haven't actually played it, but
really?
It's going to happen. It's going to happen.
You missed it, man. It's not going to...
It's kind of like... You know, like, but it's like one of those things where, like, you know, like the Academy Awards will happen and everybody's like, that movie was incredible, and then you watch it like 5 years later and you're like, I mean, it was fine, right? But like, it's like at that moment it was just so...
My favorite example is Catcher in the Rye. Like, if you read that book between the ages of like 12 and like 16, you're like, this guy
is Catcher in the Rye. Does that translate to, like, do you all read?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
I haven't actually read it, but I know what you mean.
Like, once again, we missed it.
It's what we teach in school, but not everybody does every book, so...
so we missed the formative period for it.
It was so incredible because I think, like, it was on PlayStation, right? So it was like this 3D role-playing game that, like, out the gate, it starts crazy. Like, you are, like, basically like a leftist terrorist organization that's, like, blowing up power plants just, like, off the bat, which I think, like, you know, as a kid, I was like, whoa! Like, you're just sort of, like, thrown into it. And then there's like a couple moments in that game where, like, you leave the city for the first time and you think, like, this game is really contained and on the rails, and then suddenly you have this huge map that opens up. It was just sort of like, it was so cool. And I just remember going back to school like every Monday and like catching up with my friend and being like, my friend Damon, and then we got into skateboarding together, partly because of Tony Hawk. Cool. But like he would just he would just be like, "Oh, I just got like a blue chocobo," right? Like you would just like show up and you'd be like, "I just did this," or "I just got stuck on this," and I don't know. That game was just so incredible in a way that like I'm trying to think of like games that have blown my mind more than that. Mario, but I was like a kid.
Yeah. That. You're right, that moment, because you've been playing for, like, oh god, like, hours inside the city of Midgard. Like, I don't know how many hours. 10, 12, maybe even more.
It feels like a long
time.
You
feel like it's on the rails and, like... But then, every time I think about it, it does fill me with, like, this warm nostalgia, but then when you get there, it's like, oh, this turn-based fight is taking real long.
Yeah. I mean,
super long.
That's the that is the thing about JRPGs, and I think as we segue into the next thing, the thing I want to talk about the most is that it's like, you know, there is something so comforting about the turn-based JRPG battle. You know what I mean? Like it's like, oh, I know how this works. Did you guys play the new Dragon Quest at all?
No, what's that like?
It's really, really good. It's Dragon Quest 11, and it is like, you know, to my mind, it's like the best version of a JRPG that we're ever gonna get. You know, like in terms of like the graphics are gorgeous, the story is amazing, the characters are great, the voice acting is great, everything about it is so fucking cool. But it is a turn-based JRPG, you know what I mean? And so even though you put all these incredible modern bells and whistles on this like scaffolding, it is old, you know, the gameplay and the idea is sort of outdated, and it definitely feels that way, where it's like, I can't believe they put this fresh coat of paint on this game that could easily be just like, you know, a 2D Super Nintendo game.
Well, I wonder if this is I'm following a tangent here, so but I wonder if like the roguelike deck builder games have in some ways found a way to like capture the sort of patience that you get from a turn-based RPG. Because I do like the ability to strategize, but I think that like, you know, the Slay the Spires or, you know, all the sorts of games that have come out since then that have been similar to that, they give you a little bit of that extra kind of game feeling that I think some of the like that doesn't like quite fill the gaps of your like turn-based RPG game in the same way. Even Final Fantasy VII, like that bar is just like, it's a time bar where you're just sitting there and the enemy's not even attacking you, right? Like it's just, it doesn't make sense. Like it could just be, it could happen so much faster.
Yeah, if you watch the sort of trajectory between like Final Fantasy VII's battles, then going through 8, 9, on. 10-2, which I think was the last one they released with a turn-based, like a traditional turn-based system, you can see the real progression of like them tightening that up and making it just clip along at a much nicer pace. Mm-hmm. But then they went like completely out of the... James knows, he remembers like last time I played Final Fantasy 12, because I tried, I played through most of them when I was a kid, when I say kid, like into my teens, but then I came back again in my late 20s and tried to 100% as many of them as I could. I did not make it. But 12, I was literally 3 bosses away from 100%ing 12. I was like, I can do this. I can muscle through. I hate 12, but I will do this. But it's just, I sat there.
How long was that final fight?
I had programmed all my, what are they called, gambits? I programmed all my gambits. I went up against this big boss in this arena. I put the controller down, and I did not touch that controller for 3 hours. And after 3 hours, we had somewhere to go. So I just had to turn it off.
Oh my God.
The boss is still alive. Like, it was
got that
like,
sort of
exactly.
time.
I didn't even touch the damn thing for like 3 hours.
That is
how is that a
truly
game?
Unbelievable. You're just watching it at that point. And
we were playing a board game while it was happening, and just sort of were flabbergasted at how long it was taking. Yeah.
Every once in a while, my wife will come in and I'll be playing like a video game on the screen. I'll have like chess going on like my laptop, and I'll be playing like, you know, some game on my phone at the same, like, or just like I feel like quarantine has been which you all are not in quarantine anymore. We're still in the midst of quarantine, but it's been a sea of screens over here.
So it's interesting. The game that I want to talk about in terms of my nostalgia fix is also a JRPG, also by Square. Before it was Square Enix, so I can honestly and earnestly say Squaresoft. Which is Chrono Trigger, which is the game that stands out in my mind. Like, before that, I got Nintendo Power Magazine, and I had a Super Nintendo, and I would sort of look at Nintendo Power Magazine and think about, there were games I kind of wanted or was interested in, and then every Christmas I'd get like 1 or 2 games. Maybe if I was good throughout the year, I'd get another 1 or 2, but I was just sort of playing whatever was around. And then that game, I saw an ad for it, was like, I want this, I got it. And it was the perfect melt. It's like, in my mind, the closest thing there is to a perfect game. You know, like you play something like now, like Hades, and you're like, okay, sure, incredible, like just like the total mastery of sort of what's going on now in games. But Chrono Trigger, it's like a little time capsule of like, if you want to play a JRPG and you want to know what it's about, like, in that era, I think you go to that game specifically. It's so tight.
Does
the
it
battle
still hold
system
up?
is fun. Yes, 100%. However, I do not know if that's because I play it, you know, basically like once every couple of years, just to remind myself how much I love it.
Yeah, it's that game for you, like how Tombi is that game for me. Yeah, I've been meaning to play it since my friend, and like when I was 16, my best friend in high school was like, you've got to play this. We actually did like for this is my friend Lawrence who moved to the UK, and we, for our media studies project, we did a radio station that was the anime radio station where we just played a whole bunch of anime theme songs and talked about anime in the breaks. It was just, we just had to on a cassette, you guys. We recorded
that sounds absolutely amazing.
What's a cassette?
I miss cassettes. But yeah,
having to pencil and the tape unspooled.
I don't think I do. He actually asked me that last time we talked, but yeah, no, I don't think I do. Maybe, I think we even had to just hand it into the teacher and we never saw it again. I mean, I can't remember honestly, what grade we got.
Probably for the best, because if we're talking about video games that you return to and they don't, like, stand the test of time, I don't think the anime radio show from Media Studies may.
No, probably not. But yeah, so he told me to play it then, and I always meant to, and I just need to do it.
Yeah.
Do it. Well, get out there and get that game. What's it on now, I wonder?
You can get it.
Can I play it on Switch?
But my advice is just get it on the original translation, the original version on an emulator, because they've fucked with it a couple times, and those are all fun.
Watch your mouth, dude.
Oh my god, I did it again! Ah! Okay, that's the second.
There's another one too, but I wasn't going to say anything about that one.
I'm going to write a post-it note right now.
It's staying in. Too bad. It's all good. So yeah, the original, because is it like charmingly janky, or like
they screwed with the menu type a little bit and made it sort of like a more modern looking, like kind of like polished typeface, which you don't need. Give me the old chunky pixelated text and the original translation, all sorts of stuff. It's really a special game. It's a really, really cool game, and it's not huge, which is the thing I think that I feel like that era of RPGs stacks up well to now, is like, as we've continued on outwards, like you play Dragon Quest XI, and it's like, this is so cool and it's big, but it's still kind of a JRPG with this thing. Like when you play Final Fantasy X and you're like, this is exhaustively huge, but I am still kind of bored by the fighting. Like, this game is small, and so you're supposed to, like, the fighting doesn't happen as much as in those big games, and you'll be able to beat it in like a week if you play it a bunch. It's great. It's like those small games.
Cool.
I don't think the JRPG battle system was supposed to stretch as much as we've tried to make it stretch.
Final Fantasy definitely has a potential for, like, the bigger the battle, the more epic.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Often I find that, like, in a lot of RPGs, they'll just put in fights just to be like, what will you do? Why don't you fight some stuff? And it's just, I get bored with fighting there.
How does, just like a quick comparison, Dragon Quest XI, is it at all similar to, like, Persona 5's battle system, or is it, like, completely different?
It's more sort of your standard, like, bar charging kind of thing. I think the Persona 5 battle system, I actually felt like they made enough of an effort to update it that it was kind of fun and different and interesting and engaging. And this is not that. There's, the combo attacks you can do where if two people are charged up with their limit breaks, you can, like, do a bunch of different things, and you can learn a lot of those. So it's not just like everyone has one or two attacks with each other. And so to say, like, if you like JRPGs in that system, Dragon Quest XI is a really good one. It's super fun, but I just, I know that when they made the Final Fantasy VII remake, they kind of did something very different. I haven't played that game, but the battle system feels very different from what I understand, and I think that's kind of exciting. Like, they're trying something new.
I need to try it. I actually got it for Christmas. I need to actually try it.
Because I need to play originals.
Fantasy VII. Well, we'll see if you actually make it through, because if you're watching me play remake, maybe you'll, like...
We'll see
maybe that's the thing. We'll have to report eventually down the track when James eventually plays 7.
Oh yeah, I was thinking once I've played it, we'll totally have to do a podcast episode about it.
Yeah. I mean,
maybe we can tie it into you doing the remake.
Yeah. I mean, maybe we'll just talk about Final Fantasies in general.
I was going to. I thought about nostalgia games.
Yeah.
And I thought about 2 nostalgia games, which are amongst my original CD games, because we're not going back to the Amstrad for this, that's too old. I relied on bargain bins for my games. So even when I got my original games, they were old even by that standard.
In PC only, right? You weren't a console.
No, I wasn't a console gamer, I was a PC gamer. But actually, I can remember sort of 3 of my original games. And the first one I remember is, of course, Warcraft 1, which finally managed to run out of nostalgia for me somewhere in the World of Warcraft expansions, but like that kept me going for a long time through Warcraft 1 and 2 and 3 and what have you. But actually it's the other 2 that I was going to focus on more, because so far all the examples I've had of nostalgia has been nostalgia that's held up.
Oh. Well, I mean, 7, yeah.
Yeah, well, so this is one that I've been telling Claire about for years, like, oh, this game, it's really cool, it's got this huge world you can explore, and it's got this really awesome story, and so it's called Betrayal at Krondor.
You guys played that at all?
I read the book.
So it's based on the Raymond E. Feist books, and then he wrote a novelization of it later, and the novelization was terrible. When it came out, it was sort of I think it's the first RPG I played, and it blew my mind. There's this massive world that you can explore. When I realized that the optimal thing to do is to turn in the opposite direction from wherever you're told to go and just run in the opposite way and see what you can find. And everything is animated, and they had actors playing all of the parts, and no matter what you try to do, everything is done like it's a book. So if you use a whetstone, it doesn't just say, like, sword now has 89%. It says, Locklear picked up the whetstone and ran it testingly over the edge of the blade, and like everything is written out in full like this.
Oh, wow. That's excessive.
Yeah.
So we finally loaded it up now.
He's been telling me to play this for years, by the way.
Yeah, you can go busking in the inns, and depending on how well you do, they'll throw you out of the inn, or they'll start crying because it was so moving. I loaded it up, and it was like, Claire, this is it. This is the game. It looks so bad. It's just painful to look at. The graphics are so out of date.
It's one of those ones where it's like you press like the arrow buttons to turn your view 90 degrees. It's that old.
Oh no.
Part of that thing of like when it came out, it was really groundbreaking.
Yeah.
Sure.
But that was like 30 years ago now. And we've kept breaking further ground since then.
I think that's the thing.
It's doesn't hold up.
The groundbreaking ones are almost like they almost have the biggest target on their back as far as like returning to, right? Because it's like this was
so true.
It was the first one that did this, right? Which just sort of means like everything that came after it, like improved upon that new thing. Yeah. So you look back and you're just like, oh no, like that's bad.
Yeah, because like this has a fully 3D open world RPG
that you can only explore by tapping one arrow key at a time.
And the fully 3D is like the simplest of what. Like, how would you
fully 3D that you can only view like flatly from one angle at a time.
Yeah.
This sounds absolutely incredible.
All the like live actors who've been digitized for their animations look incredibly pixelated. And
I mean, I do find that really charming.
Yeah, but like
because they kept doing that, like up and up and up, like pixelated things up into like. What's that one that Tim Curry was in? Command and Conquer?
Tim Curry was in Command and Conquer?
Yeah.
Wait, or am I thinking of the wrong thing?
No, it's Command and Conquer.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
I am? Okay.
That's
and
funny.
There's this awesome video on the internet of him corpsing during one of his lines. And
it's so ridiculous that even he can't deliver it without cracking up.
It's when the communists are going to go take over space. So it's just like,
What's his line? It's like, I will now go to the one place that hasn't been polluted by capitalism. Space! You can see him losing it.
I don't think they managed to get a cut of him not laughing.
I mean, he manages to... It's the smallest laugh.
He just keeps it in. Just. Yeah.
I couldn't keep it in with that title.
No. Oh, God, I'm struggling right now with the role I'm in. I'm playing Lady Bracknell in The Importance of Being Earnest. And she's a massive bitch for, like, the whole way through. And then when she finally needs something from someone, just to be like, my dear Mr. Worthing. And every time I have to say that, I just corpse because it's like... What a bitch.
That's so funny. Betrayal at Krondor, I was just looking at screenshots. That game looks absolutely so of an era. so uniquely.
Right? Yeah.
It was an era of PC gaming that I completely missed. You know, that sort of like early 3D Western RPG.
Yeah.
I don't know. In general, like Western RPGs, until I played Skyrim, they didn't really grab me very much. But that one, like, really yanked me into the world of video gaming in general. Although I wonder, so a game like Skyrim, which is, I think, going to be in 10 years sort of viewed the same way as like some of the things we're talking about.
It is 10
oh my God, that's right. But
this is...
But, and they're still selling it on like new consoles. You know what I mean? Like the game is still there. But I
just bought it on the Switch because I was like, no way can I play this on a handheld console. I just had to I had to see it to believe it because we just got a Switch. And it was just like, oh my God, I am playing something that I had to have like a big, beefy PC to play 10 years ago. I'm now playing on a handheld console.
Yeah.
Did you, so you just got the Switch?
Yeah.
Have you guys gotten Breath of the Wild yet?
Not yet. So he's got a whole, he was telling you last week about
I love me my Zelda.
Yeah.
And actually I was using
whole system.
But when we were talking about nostalgia, I was saying Breath of the Wild feels, from what I've seen, from what I've heard, feels like they went, do you remember what it felt like to play Zelda back in the day? We're going to make a game with modern sensibilities, but it will feel like that again.
It's 100% correct. Yeah. And I think that's like that was certainly my experience with it. Like, I have never had that experience as an adult to pick up something and instantly feel like, oh my God, there is so much possibility in this world, so much stuff that can like potentially happen. But also, it retroactively, if you play Skyrim now after playing that game, it's like, man, I can't fucking do anything in this game.
Alex!
Oh, I did it again! I have a sign that says no swearing. I did it again.
I better get all my Skyriming out of the way before I touch Breath of the Wild.
So what I've been doing, it's just sort of wound up this way. When Nintendo did their retro releases, we got the first Nintendo retro thing, and it had Zelda 1 and Zelda 2. So I clocked them. And then they released the Super Nintendo Mini. So I clocked Zelda 3.
And now we're going to
I started playing on an emulator on my phone, Zelda 4, which was the Game Boy one. And it turned out my phone is really not a very good controller. That's been updated for the Switch, so I'm going to play it with the updated graphics. So.
The sort of little toy graphics.
But it looks like I'm going through them in order.
How is it? How's that experience? Is there some, is there continuity in the story?
No.
Okay.
I understand that later on they released this giant hardback book, like absolutely massive tome, where they show what the continuity is actually like.
There is
apparently a continuity, and it's all based on Ocarina of Time, and the idea that Ocarina of Time
okay, sure, yeah.
That's my understanding. But the real continuity is...
Yeah.
The continuity is the dumbest thing I've ever seen. And like such a great example of like why a company like Nintendo shouldn't bow to do fan service like that, you know? Because now they've hemmed in this thing. There's this series that I love. It's this guy, Alec Robbins, who during quarantine in the US has been doing this comic called Mr. Boop, with this sort of surrealist, strange thing where he just imagines that he's married to Betty Boop. And then what that means, he's best friends with like Sonic, and it's a very funny thing. He just wrapped it up. It's cool and gets dark and very weird, and it's like, you know, he has a lot of the same touch points I think as we do with like anime and video games. But he did the series called Mariology, where Zelda came out with a timeline. So he tried to take every single Mario game and put it in order of like a timeline, and it does not work. So it's him and 3 friends for 5 hours trying to do that, and they go insane.
I tried to do that for Greek mythology, actually.
Oh, yeah.
I tried to put Greek mythology in actual... Because there was a guy back in the day, you know, in ancient Rome, who calculated the dates of the Trojan War.
Oh, wow.
So I was like, okay, so given that we know that the Trojan War happened in, like, 1184 BC, and given that everything is like 10 years for this, 10 years for that, can you calculate Greek mythology.
Oh my god.
Short answer.
The answer was no. Spoiler alert.
No, the answer was no. And actually, I increasingly feel like continuity is a trap. So, my sort of official favourite TV show, because like, you can't actually have a favourite TV show, there's too many in this. My official favourite TV show is Doctor Who, right? If somebody's going to ask me what's the best TV show, sure, it's Doctor Who. And there's no continuity in Doctor Who. They're just like, hey, didn't the aliens invade London, like, just 2 weeks ago, and now everyone's surprised there's an alien? Just don't think about it.
I love that. I love it so much.
Yeah.
It exists in this nebulous world. It's the same thing with, like, children's cartoons. The original run of, like, post-Reagan basically, like, eliminating the idea that a toy company can't make these massive commercials into, like, cartoons, you know, for, like, Transformers and stuff like that. But like every week, it just sort of resets, and it's like a new dilemma in the universe of these things. And then there's occasionally these tentpole ones where stuff happens, but I like that so much more than a sort of strung along story, unless they're going to do it really, really well. You know, unless there's a contention.
Adventure Time, I think, was one that did a good job cartoon wise.
Yeah, we love Adventure Time. Yeah,
I think if you set out to do it, great, but there's no reason to there's no reason to take like three things that kind of vaguely fit in the same universe and then jam them together. Like that sort of, that doesn't make sense.
It's like, do you guys ever watch Lost?
No.
Don't. You don't need to.
No, that came out when I was like 16 or something, so it was like a little bit like too busy with school and theatre after school and everything, and then I heard everything that happened down the way, and a bunch of people were very angry about it.
I think it's that thing of, if you're going to do something that involves continuity and mysteries and stuff, figure out what you're doing before you start.
Are you thinking of something very specific?
No, I'm not. Why would you say that? Star Wars. But actually, I was also thinking of Battlestar Galactica.
Oh, yeah.
Where,
that was hit by the writers.
Yeah, but also, like, they never actually knew where they were going with that. And they pulled up all these, like, big concepts in the later seasons. Like, there's another 5 Cylons, because they basically said they'd run out of steam and they didn't know what they were doing, so they're like, more!
It
just messed with everything.
It was so interesting how, like, great the first couple of seasons of that show were, and then there was, like, just that very specific moment, specifically with, like, the music, that when like, that became, like, something they were hearing as opposed to, like, music that we were just, like, sort of, that added to the ambience of the show. It's like, where are they going with this? And where they went with it was, like, so weird. Felt so different.
It really was, the whole Watchtower thing was, it was so bizarre. I wonder if anyone's tried to, like, do a bad, like, continuity for Final Fantasy.
Oh, that's funny.
What I read recently was that actually, of course, but what I read recently was that actually Final Fantasy 15 was supposed to take place in the same universe as Final Fantasy 13, but then like they separated the two projects. Yeah,
I love the Magic the Gathering way of doing it, where it's just like, oh yeah, there's different planes, and some people can go there. Yeah. But every time we release a new card set, it's whatever we want to do, so we'll just make a new plane.
Yeah,
I think that's a really clever idea doing that, because like we're massive flavor fans, and so like the mechanics are pretty repetitive. Every set is basically the same mechanically, but it's completely different in terms of like the flavor and the aesthetic you bring to it, and that changes things so much.
The balance of different sets is different, though.
Sure. I mean, I'm oversimplifying when I say every set's basically the same. But
I know. I was like, do I argue that?
Yeah,
I could say.
Do I really want to step in this trap? You like laid this beautiful trap out there, and I didn't take it.
No, what I mean is like, in terms of, like limited gameplay, you've got the same effects that get repeated because we do a lot of limited stuff, and so you've got the same basic card effects get reprinted, but like with the mechanic of the month on them. And so it does start getting samey. Yeah, but like. Viking World looks awesome. And then then what do we have before that? Zendikar, which we don't care about so much.
It was fine.
Wasn't Ikoria more
Oh yeah, Korea, like Godzilla World. Sweet.
Yeah. The beasts.
Yeah.
I was into the last one I was
really
into was
clever
Theros.
idea for just keeping things fresh.
I was going to talk about cards, but yeah, we love Theros. We have a cube of Theros, which is just like ridiculous high power.
The rule of thumb is anything that says like double, it goes in the cube, so that everything's like 50-50. And
you want Hydra? Everyone can be a Hydra.
yeah.
I feel like just talking about like continuity and stuff, and like Khans of Tarkir. Like everyone loved Khans, and then when Dragons of Tarkir came out, people were like, bring back the Khans. But like they've literally got time travel baked into that setting, so like they could, if they revisit it, they could muck around with it anyway.
They will. They totally will.
Yeah.
I don't pay. Do you two pay much attention to like the actual story? Like, have you?
I do.
You're like big story going into the sets kind of thing. I
don't give a damn.
I actually cleared the pictures, basically.
What I really enjoy about Magic from like a storytelling perspective is like I don't know. I usually have no idea what the story is going. You know, like I'll look at spoilers kind of casually, but I love that I'm being told a story kind of in fragmented pieces from the cards and through the flavor text. And I think to me, that is just like such a delightful way to consume a story and to like not get like the full picture, but not really want the full, like in a lot of ways, like, like you were saying, Alex, with the stories of Magic, like the stories themselves are often like, they're not like gripped, you know, I'm not gripped by them. I'm in the same way that James is. Yeah. I'm not like blown away by the story. Like, but I think like the world is
away for a while.
Well, I think the worlds
though
are so cool. Yeah, and the characters are so cool. And I almost want to be able to craft my own story with the cards, right? Like it's like I want this world that you've given me and I want to play in it. And they give me the ability to do that.
Yeah,
I think
agree.
that's the most charming.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. Like, but also there's like, oh, pretty, and then I'll put that card in my deck.
Yeah, like for me, the real star of Kaldheim is like it's not Kea, who I've never really cared about as a character. It's not Tybalt, who I like laughing at as a character.
Oh yeah, we've like rubbished Tybalt for so long.
Everyone has, you know. Like to me, the real star of Kaldheim is Kaldheim, the world. It's a really cool world. It looks awesome. It's got good design. It's it's a cool sort of mythology plus magic mechanics and tropes smushed together.
It's very
Unfortunately, the correct answer is Jace is the star of Magic. The Mind Freak.
Ajani is the best character.
The Mind Freak. You know, Ajani is my favorite.
There's They're working on a show. They're working on a Magic the Gathering show. It'll be very interesting to see what that ends up looking like.
With what, the Russo brothers, I think?
Is it with the Russo brothers?
They were involved with it.
Oh, wow.
I just feel like it's going to be terrible no matter what. That's
I
all I
know
can
Dungeons
think.
and Dragons now has a TV show announced. Done.
Oh, really?
John Wick.
Oh, cool. I mean, sure.
We'll see what happens.
Yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
Honestly, I would watch it. That's the thing, though, is I think like a lot of times they try to do too much, right? Like if you imagine, like I think in some ways that's we've been watching The Mandalorian, and The Mandalorian is very fun, right? Like it's just like they chose a very small, like lane, and they stuck to it, and like the idea of a John Wick set in D&D is like perfect, but there's no way that you're going to get something so specific, right? Like you're going to get like the Warcraft movie. I don't know if you all saw the Warcraft movie.
We did.
Nonsense.
We sort of loved and hated it at once.
Like visually so rich, but like I kept turning to him and like I had different names for people because like I had no idea.
You have to.
I can't remember who I'm swearing about. But
Dick
like,
Jesus.
Oh, that's right, Dick Jesus. Like the mage who I didn't know anyone's name. I didn't know anyone's name, so I was just making up nicknames for them as I went along. Because it was one of those movies where they weren't good at telling you people's names. Oh, and then
the accent, so Lothar's.
Yeah. I was like,
Lothar's name.
Lothar? I could never pick up his name because people would just say it really quickly and like with their different
accent every time.
Yeah. And then that magician, the wizard guy who basically looked like Jesus, but he was a dick, so I called him Dick Jesus.
My favorite character in World of Warcraft gotta be Jace. Sorry, guys.
I'm confused. Is that?
That's the joke.
Right now. I get it. Sorry, I'm slow.
There's not a real joke there. Sorry about that.
No, I like the World of Warcraft movie, but it wasn't good.
No,
but I
really
did like
it.
Good.
It was
directed
by David Bowie's son.
There was a review I read about that.
I know, yeah.
There's a review I read which basically said that the guy who was watching it, who was a medievalist, was like, this is so unrealistic and stupid. And then the movie would do something that would basically wink at how stupid it was.
Yeah. I definitely enjoyed that movie. And it's like, like...
For what it is.
Yeah. And how many, like, good big fantasy... Like, I feel like we're not gonna get some good big like, Game of Thrones has just sort of wiped the board as far as, like, big fantasies are concerned. Like, it's gonna be a while before we get a good cinematic... We maybe have lived through the best cinematic fantasy time that we're just gonna get, right? Like, we've probably got the biggest budget fantasy movies, World of Warcraft being maybe this like big pinnacle.
And like everything that comes after is just a copycat, right? Like this happened with Lord of the Rings
came out, and then everything had to be Lord of the Rings.
Like Narnia had to be Lord of the Rings, which was the ruination of that little one because
I remember watching the first Narnia movie and I loved it, and then it would be like, hang on, what's this? Why are you doing this Lord of the Rings stuff?
Why are we having this humongous fantasy battle?
Yeah,
that's not CS.
Yeah. Do you all remember? Did you watch the
tea party?
Sorry, did you watch the BBC Narnia growing up at all?
Oh, back in the day.
I loved it. Those beavers look like corn dogs. I don't know if you remember the beavers, but they are just the goofiest looking things in the world.
The way they talk about Turkish Delight in that one really wants some Turkish Delight.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
We actually, in my class, because we actually studied, specifically Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, I think in my, third year, I don't know what you guys call it in elementary school over there, but the third year of primary school, we did Narnia as our focus topic, and we watched some of those, and we actually got to cook Turkish Delight in class. And
would you sell
that's fun.
The devil for it?
Not for the one you made.
I'm quite partial to. I'm quite partial to the quite partial to the chocolate covered ones we get here as chocolate bars. Yeah.
I mean, I hate to be annoying about this, but I have a question about Lord of the Rings for you guys.
Go on.
Do you do you feel like you have a complicated relationship to that franchise or trilogy based on sort of its connections with New Zealand at all? Are you sick of it? Were you like?
Oh no,
what do you think of it?
We're not. So we have always been massive Lord of the Rings fans separately, growing up.
So when we're talking about nostalgia, my real nostalgia thing, the nostalgia for me is Lord of the Rings.
Mm-hmm.
He's a freak.
I read it really early.
He read the Silmarillion at age 6.
No, I read the Lord of the Rings at age 6.
Oh,
wow.
wow.
I read the Silmarillion, I was, I think, 7 or 8.
I couldn't do it. I mean, I
struggled
remember
to read The Hobbit at 8.
Because I definitely read The Hobbit pretty young, and The Hobbit is an appropriate young book. And then I was probably 12 or 11 when I tried to get through the Fellowship of the Rings, and just couldn't. And it wasn't until about 7 or 8 years ago that I actually read the books. I love them.
I remember when you read the books. You were such a dork about it for a while.
So
it was great.
Good. They're so good.
Yeah.
Yeah, for me it was like when I was 21, I picked up Lord of the Rings again, going like, oh god, like it took me 6 months to struggle through this when I was 10, but because it was my dad's favourite book, I really, really tried. And I was like, okay, I actually took it with me. I used to date an officer on a cruise ship, and I got to go on the cruise ship for 2 months, and the only book I took with me was Lord of the Rings, because I was like, this is all I'm going to need. It took me 6 months last time. This is all I'll need. I read it in 9 days, because by that stage, I was a better reader, obviously, and I was just like, bam. I was so in it.
I was in India. That's where I studied abroad, and I finished. We were about to get on a train that was going to last for about like 38 hours, and I finished my book and was like freaking out. What am I going to do for 38 hours on this Indian train? And I ran, like the train's getting ready to leave. I ran out, found a bookseller, and bought like some Tom Clancy, government thriller, and literally started reading it, read it for the whole 38 hours, and finished it like as we pulled into the other station. And it was just such a bad book, but a very entertaining page turner.
Yeah,
that's perfect for times like that. Yeah. We don't hate Lord of the Rings. I think like people who maybe live in more touristy places
might have more of a reaction to it. And I know we have a more complicated reaction to, well, it's not complicated. Our reaction is more to The Hobbit, which stuffed up labour laws for actors.
Yeah, our like political and our as you know, sort of around the creative industries, we're not particularly happy with how Peter Jackson got the national government to ram through a thing that screws over
unionization.
Yeah.
Oh, really? I had no idea.
Yeah. Hollywood was threatening to pull out because our actors had too many rights, so they took away the rights from the actors so that they could have the movies filmed in.
Yeah.
And that's those ramifications stick around? Wow.
Yep.
I didn't know that at all. That's terrible.
It's still probably better than some places in the world, realistically. We've got
the US?
Probably, just assuming. I haven't specifically looked at the
take much.
Laws around creative industries, but no, it really doesn't, does it?
It's not good.
Yeah, no, not at all. But a lot of actors were quite unhappy post The Hobbit, even the ones who were in it and the ones who weren't in it.
Yeah.
And I've seen some things that make me really sad, like some of the dwarves who, had smaller parts were New Zealand and Australian actors and stuff. And they just sort of felt like they had no fun at all. They'd get into huge amounts of prosthetics every morning and then
wait around in case someone needed them.
Yeah.
Oh, we're not
nothing.
Doing that.
Yeah. And it sounds so disappointing when you hear how wonderfully everyone felt on Lord of the Rings, comparatively.
Because they got the time to do all the prep beforehand, whereas with The Hobbit...
Jackson didn't even really
Guillermo del Toro.
Yeah.
And then he pulled out. And Peter Jackson went in, and he had done no prep.
Yeah, he didn't.
And they weren't using Del Toro stuff, but the studio said, "You've had this much time has been spent in prep, so go."
Yeah.
And so they were just making the whole thing as they went along. It was awful.
Yeah, they're not good. They're not good. I mean, they're fun and stupid, but they're not good movies.
Even it's fun and stupid movies.
The thing that made the third movie fun was when halfway through, James turned to me and said, "Claire, this is not a Hobbit movie. This is not a Tolkien movie. We are watching the greatest Warhammer movie ever made."
That's so funny.
Yeah, I had
there's
this moment
Dick Jesus.
There's nothing in common with the book.
No,
it is just a Warhammer movie which happens to have people with the same names.
Yeah.
And I was able to appreciate it on that level.
You know what?
That's honestly so funny. I wish I had thought about it like that, because if it's a Warhammer movie, I bet I like it. You know what I mean? I like Warhammer.
My favorite thing about the Hobbits movies is Orlando Bloom, because Orlando Bloom is supposed to be this ageless elf, and this is supposed to be a prequel, but he's obviously older and obviously slower. It's just he's aged so much that they're like the fight scenes with him, like in the Lord of the Rings, he's just like always running. He can't act, but he's like a pretty face that's just always running and scurrying up stuff, and he's just like so good at it. You're like, he is like quintessential elf in Lord of the Rings, and in The Hobbit, it's just a little clunkier. And he's like trying to get up stuff a little more.
Can handle that when he has to run up a collapsing bridge.
That was the moment that I lost it, and just tears were running down my face when he just defied gravity and just climbed up a crumbling stair.
We watched Lord of the Rings a couple of maybe a month into quarantine here. Me and Eric with our wives over Zoom, we're watching it, and I was not ready for how funny the big special effects moments were this time around. Like the part where Legolas goes the other way around the horse to get on it.
Oh,
oh my god!
It did not hold up. It doesn't hold up. I remember seeing that at 14 and being jacked. Yes, he's getting on the horse different. This is so cool.
It just looks like you'd get run over by the horse.
It was so bad. It was unfortunate.
Oh,
I love those movies.
Oh, they're great.
Yeah,
the Hobbit movies are good if you watch some of the fan cuts online.
Yeah, there's one called the Maple Cut, and they cut it down to
4 hours.
It's still a little bit too long.
Hours.
It's still a little bit too long, but they keep the good stuff in, and it's much more bearable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Basically,
well,
the
guess what?
Get to stay, and all the fun stuff that was in the book. Much better.
It's my birthday tomorrow, and we've been watching movies on Friday with our wives, and I might suggest the Maple Cut. It's either that or
the Popeye movie.
No.
Katie said, "Be prepared that it could be the Popeye movie."
There's a movie called Your Name. That's one of my favorite animes. That is really wonderful, and I just love the idea of making Camille watch that for my birthday.
Oh, yeah, please do. Although the Maple Cut, the 4-hour Hobbit movie.
4-hour Hobbit would be pretty good too.
Well, we should just force the double feature. Just say it's my birthday. We skipped
really into fantasy.
She's really not. It's actually okay, right? She's not into video games. She's not into fantasy. It's totally fine. I don't need to disappear into these worlds. I need somebody to ground me, to keep me
right. Yeah.
to keep me here and now.
James,
no,
I'm the worst enabler.
We both enable each other terribly.
He's stop me from spending $100 on cardboard, and I'm like, oh, what's the cardboard?
I'm about to spend almost $200 on cardboard to Kaldheim.
No.
And Claire's ooh.
No, you've done worse. You buy up a lot of extinct card games.
Yeah.
Oh wow! Do you have a favorite? Do you have a favorite extinct card game that you've bought?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
Yep. So the best extinct card game out there is Legend of the Five Rings.
Oh, I thought you were going to say something else.
Oh, which one were you thinking?
I thought you were going to say Mythos.
Oh,
Mythos is pretty good.
Mythos is amazing. And Wars, I've got a thing coming for that, except that was $1, so that's okay.
Old L5R. So there's a new L5R.
Yeah. So
that none of the old players like. They all want old L5R to come back.
After Magic came out and was massively successful, there were 10 million people who tried to get on that bandwagon. And Legend of the Five Rings is one of the few games that actually managed to sort of stick the landing and stick around more than a year or two.
Stuck around for a good 2 decades.
Yeah, 20 years, and then they sold it to another company, and it's got relaunched and it's still going now. And it's a samurai game, and the big deal with it is that there's an ongoing storyline. That's where Magic basically took the idea of doing an ongoing storyline from.
Yeah.
But players got to influence what happened in the storyline.
Oh, cool.
And so, the big example... Yeah, so the big example is at the World Championships at the end of 2 years. The 7 Thunders, who were the reincarnated heroes from each of the different factions, faced off against the Dark God for a battle to control the Empire. The guy who came second place was wearing a Shadowlands t-shirt, the bad guys. If he had won, they were going to say, okay, all the heroes died, the bad guys won, and this is what happened next. And they had different envelopes on stage, and they would rip them up as factions got eliminated.
Oh, cool.
But at the end,
love that.
one of the good guy factions managed to win, and so his hero was responsible for defeating the Dark God and becoming the new emperor.
Didn't you get a
That's
surprise?
honestly so cool.
Yeah,
I love that.
One minor character got married. That was my contribution. Yeah.
Wait, really?
Yeah, it was worldwide and...
Yeah. So early on, it was all in USA, really.
They did it at Gen Con every year.
Yeah.
They like big events at Gen Con.
Yeah. So early on, they could do things like something cool happens in like one individual game, and the story's going to be standing and being like, I'm putting that in the story next week.
Cool.
And it was really awesome.
It must have been a monstrosity organised.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'd get these really bizarre story results, and they'd be like, okay, the humanoid rats have just won the poetry competition. How are we going to make this one work, guys? And at times they'd have too many prizes going at once, so they'd have to be like, okay, we've got to wrap up all these 7 different things in our weekly story this week. Yeah.
And they'd have like a yearly, like, big role-playing thing, right? Like play-by-post on forums.
It wasn't yearly. It was like every couple of years they'd do one because it was so big.
Yeah.
So because people were complaining like, oh, if you're not the top tournament players, you can't really affect the story.
You had to like fill out a huge application of like, how long have you been playing this game? Because I know like you and Fred got in, but I missed out because I'd been playing for like 1 year, and they were just like, come on, play this thing with us.
Yeah.
Oh well.
It was
But yeah, when they sold it onto Fantasy Flight, it just old L5R came to an end, and then they re-released it. And
the old game was
honestly,
that's rules didn't quite work properly, but that was part of the fun. And the new one is all very smooth and polished, and kind of lost a lot of the sort of fun.
That's so interesting to me, just as like an idea. Like, how long do you think until they're just doing that with Marvel movies? You know what I mean? Where it's like, man, we are out of ideas. Why don't we just let the fans decide somehow? You know? Or I guess with Star Wars at this point, they kind of don't have anything else. They're sort of, they've done the, Star Wars is becoming Marvel, you know, more or less. So they might as well just like reboot it after this next generation of things sort of comes to a head.
I'm sure they could scour Reddit for like 3 or 4 really good movies.
They've got the entire extended universe already for Star Wars. They can do whatever they want from there and not pay the authors. It's totally messed up.
Yeah. That was so. We talked about that a few episodes before.
Not cool.
It's just scary because like the implications of that are terrifying. Like, what if Steam sold off all of the game or like their entire platform onto someone else, and then that company decided, oh, we're not paying any of the people.
No one gets any money anymore.
Not paying any of these game developers anymore. I mean, they couldn't get away with that with the AAA people because they've actually got the money behind them to sue, but like the little people, we can't do anything.
Totally.
Right. I feel like we've gone completely off topic, but I've been having an incredible amount of fun.
Me too.
Yeah.
This, like I said, this is what happens every time we have people on. We just chat.
Thanks so much, guys, for coming on.
Oh, thank you for having us.
Great chatting to you again.
Thank you for having Alex and letting me kind of tag along.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you for that.
Do you guys want to plug anything?
Bundle Buddy.
There's a zine right now that's really good with some of the short fiction.
I've got some short stories. If you go to erictroth.org/zine, you can download a PDF of a zine of 3 of my short stories. But mostly, just listen to Bundle Buddies. Subscribe to us on all the platforms. We're on Apple Podcasts. We're on Spotify, Podbean,
iHeartMedia.
You can find us on Twitter at @bundle_buddies.
And you know what the crazy thing about iHeartMedia is, Eric?
No, I don't.
I really do heart media, you know?
Oh, Alex, you're so in love with media.
I love media.
You're a freak for media.
Yeah, check out Bundle Buddies for more freaky media chat.
Yeah, I'm a fan. I have listened to actually I need to catch up with this week's one, but I've listened to every episode. So
honestly, thank you so much.
Thank you. That's incredible.
We had this realization like when early on, you know, we have, I'm very happy with the number of listeners we have, but it is pretty low. And I was like, Well, we are doing one of the most obscure indie game things you could do. So if you want to have a small number of listeners, that's a pretty good way to do it.
There was maybe 7 or 8 episodes into this, there was some. I know you're trying to wrap up, but I'm following a tangent. I saw some Twitter. Somebody posted on Twitter their podcast, and their podcast was just like Hot or Not. And it was just like they looked at people and there was like 8 of them and they all talked about whether or not they were hot. And I was like, that's so much less work.
But it's an oral media. How did and they're talking about, I'm so confused.
I don't know, but I was really jealous. Because I was like, everybody understands it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have a lot of fun. We have a lot of fun with it, though.
We've done it pretty good in that we just let James wax lyrical on a certain topic.
Cletus goes, this week we're talking about Dragon Mask. James, go!
Yeah.
And then I just
it's such a general... It's so general that it's like, literally just our friends listen to us because they want to hear us.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot of that with us.
Yeah, we talk about video games.
You don't really have a niche.
And then the next thing you know, we're talking about D&D, and it's like, where's the through line here? But... whatever.
It's us. We are the through line.
Yeah, exactly. We're the continuity.
I think for us, it's our friends and then developers skipping to where their games are to hear if we liked it or not.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully some of them will stick around because you guys are hilarious.
Thank you.
That's very kind of you.
You guys are very funny too. It's very nice to be on the pod.
We're a wee bit dry, but also like gross and married.
Yeah.
What about our plugs? Just like find us on Discord.
Yeah.
Twitter.
Join our Discord. Chat to us on Twitter, Facebook.
It's the same thing as always.
Instagram.
Skybeargames.com. That's where we are.
Yep.
And we have a thing. You guys should do this time. We have a thing where I will like say a goodbye and something, and then James will say what he's supposed to say. Keep gaming. That's his catchphrase.
I already had it queued up mentally in my head.
But for like
I keep getting it wrong.
Yeah, for like the first 10 or so episodes, he got it wrong like every time. And so the end of the podcast would just be me laughing because he got it wrong again. But we should let all you guys, I'll say the goodbye, and then all you guys can say keep going, and the delay will just be magnificent. Okay, so this is us, Skybear Games and the Bundle Buddies signing off.
Keep gaming!
Yay! That was actually not too bad.